LinkedIn presents.
If we want to regain and perhaps even exceed the happiness of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, we need to re-emphasize connection. Human beings did not evolve to live alone. We are a gregarious species who need others psychologically, even when we no longer need them physically.
Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I'm your host, Michael Kovnat. This is the Next Big Idea Daily, and whether you're celebrating with roses and chocolates or rolling your eyes at all that romantic stuff, today is a perfect reminder of something essential, our deep human need for connection. In his new book, The Social Paradox, When Finding What You Want Means Losing What You Need, evolutionary psychologist William von Hippel explains how millions of years of evolution have wired us to crave both connection and autonomy, two powerful but often competing needs. While the modern world offers us more freedom than ever before, many of us find ourselves lonelier and less satisfied. We're trading connection for independence, and according to William, it's making us unhappy. So what can we do about it? William will join us with some inspired solutions right after this quick break.
From LinkedIn News, I'm Jessie Hempel, host of the Hello Monday podcast. Start your week with the Hello Monday podcast. We'll navigate career pivots. We'll learn where happiness fits in. Listen to Hello Monday with me, Jessie Hempel, on the LinkedIn Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
Have you been feeling the effects of stress, burnout, or anxiety at work? Listen to the Anxious Achiever podcast to rethink the relationship between your career and your mental health. Get the Anxious Achiever wherever you find your podcasts, and walk away with practical advice you can implement today.
Hi, everyone. I'm William von Hippel. Thank you for joining me for this discussion. Today, I'd like to share 5 insights with you from my new book, The Social Paradox, When Finding What You Want Means Losing What You Need. Although I didn't realize it at the time, this book began a decade ago over a dinner I had with my childhood friend Steve. He'd made a fortune in the oil business, and when he invited me to his new apartment, I was excited to see how the super rich live. As I wandered through his extraordinary home, I told him that his life was over the top. Steve admitted that it seemed that way, but then explained to me, with a straight face, that it really wasn't. While I nibbled on his caviar and brie, I learned that the cook didn't get along with the maid. He and his wife couldn't agree on where to go on their next vacation. His daughter was waitlisted at the fancy kindergarten, and the list went on. By the time he finished, I felt so sorry for him that I offered to trade places, if only to sort out this vexing cook-maid problem. At the time, I marveled at Steve's inability to see his own good fortune. But later, as I read Frank Marlowe's wonderful book on Hod's the Hunter-Gatherers, it occurred to me that I'm just like Steve, and so are you. Data collected by anthropologists suggests that we're no happier, and possibly a lot less happy, than the world's remaining hunter-gatherers, who eke out a living much like our distant ancestors did. The comforts, safety, and ease of our existence make us the equivalent of multimillionaires by comparison to them, but somehow that reality hasn't made a dent in our happiness. Hunter-gatherers who own almost nothing, who have no savings for a rainy day, and who bury almost half their children are happier than we are. How could that be? There's more than one answer to this question, but I believe an important part of the story lies deep in our history. When our ancestors left the rainforest for the savanna approximately 6 million years ago, they embarked on a new evolutionary pathway that created a pair of competing needs inside all of us that must be balanced for us to experience lasting happiness. These needs were etched into our psychology because they supported 2 key goals our distant ancestors had to achieve: to bond with others for their mutual protection and to develop their own skills to make them valuable to their group and potential mates. In support of these goals, our ancestors evolved 2 corresponding needs that must both be satisfied for them to be happy. Millions of years later, we're still driven by these needs. From childhood through to old age, we have a need for connection and a need for autonomy. By connection, I mean our desire to cooperate, form social bonds, make friendships, establish long-term romantic relationships, and attach ourselves to our group. Our need for connection played a central role in our evolution, as it enabled us to cooperate to protect ourselves from predators and hunt large animals, slowly transforming us into apex predators. Connection was a matter of life or death then, and we still feel its importance today. When you bask in the comfort and camaraderie of old friends, you're feeling the product of 6 million years of evolution. At the same time, the need for connection we evolved in the savannah was supplemented by a need for autonomy, which remains our second most fundamental psychological need. By autonomy, I mean self-governance, choosing a path based on your own needs, preferences, or skills, and making independent decisions. Connection makes humans effective in their struggles against predators and harsh environments, but autonomy allows us to increase our usefulness to others. How does autonomy serve this role? By motivating us to pursue domains in which we have the best prospects. Humans are unique among all the animals in our capacity to envision the future. One of the most important tasks our large brain evolved to solve is to imagine what might happen later today, tomorrow, or next year, and then prepare for it. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of our preparations is when we change ourselves, when we decide what sort of person we need to be in our imagined future and then set about becoming that person. Our capacity to transform our actual self into our aspirational self is a large part of the reason we evolved the need for autonomy. From early childhood, our sense of who we are becomes focused on our personal attributes that have the best chance of leading us to success. Domains in which we stand out in a positive way become central aspects of our self-definition. Once these abilities become central to our self-concept, they start to occupy our minds, they become more fun and interesting, and we exercise them whenever possible. It is our sense of autonomy that leads us to choose our own path and then pursue it. Unfortunately, forming social bonds with others satisfies our connection needs but directly threatens our autonomy. Interdependence constrains our choices by requiring us to consider the consequences of our actions for others. In contrast, prioritizing our own goals and preferences over the needs and desires of others maximizes our autonomy but makes us unpalatable as relationship partners or coalition members. Evolution played a dirty trick on us by pitting our two most important needs against each other. Throughout our evolutionary history, connection was of paramount importance. We needed to form tight connections to survive, and that fact was so obvious that we connected unquestioningly. Hunter-gatherers who couldn't see the need for connection soon became lion chow. As a result, their tendency to go it alone was removed from the gene pool, and their remains served as a vivid reminder to the folks back home that survival requires connection. For that reason, our genes pushed us to connect, our cultural rules demanded connection, and our daily lives reminded us that we couldn't live without it. Connection was an obvious necessity. But autonomy was a luxury. In principle, we had an opportunity for autonomy every time our group made a decision we didn't like, but in reality, we couldn't just do our own thing. When it came time to break camp, if everyone else wanted to go north and you wanted to go south, you almost always went north. We either had to persuade people to our point of view or we had to go along with theirs. Life for our hunter-gatherer ancestors was all about connection and compromise, with opportunities for true autonomy popping up only on occasion. Given this state of affairs, we evolved a tendency to grab autonomy whenever it was genuinely available. When autonomy and connection came into conflict, as they frequently did, if it was one of those rare circumstances in which we could actually afford to be autonomous, my guess is that our ancestors seized the opportunity. Connection was our more important need, but the demands of our daily lives ensured that our connection needs were always met. As a consequence, we evolved to choose autonomy whenever we could get away with it. In our ancestral past, such situations were rare enough that our default tendency to grab autonomy whenever possible resulted in a proper balance between autonomy and connection. In our modern world, opportunities for autonomy are like fat, salt, and sugar. We evolved to crave them when they're rare, but now they're everywhere. Increasing wealth, urbanization, and education, along with dramatic increases in the occupations and entertainment options available, mean that we not only have choices our ancestors didn't dream of, we also no longer depend on each other for our survival. As a result, our evolved tendency to pick autonomy whenever we can has become a form of miswanting that has seriously disrupted the balance between these two needs. This imbalance can be seen easily in the growing tendency of Americans to live alone. In 1850, 1 in every 100 American adults lived alone. By 1950, that number was 1 in 25, and today it's 1 in 7. Where once we were super fit and highly connected because we spent our lives hungry and threatened, now we are out of shape and autonomous because we live in comfort and safety. But just because our modern world allows us to live a certain way doesn't mean it makes us happy. Autonomy without connection, the very dynamic that characterizes modern society, creates what I call sad success stories. People whose achievements feel hollow and unsatisfied because they don't have the connections they need to share them with. Our modern world has resulted in an imbalance between our two most important needs. How does this dynamic play out? In many ways, but let's pick one example. Although cities are over 5,000 years old, they didn't really catch on until about 200 years ago. Prior to 1840, fewer than 1 in 10 people worldwide lived in a city. By 1960, this number was 1 in 3. After thousands of years of very slow growth, in 120 years, the percentage of people living in cities tripled. And the pace of urbanization has only accelerated again. In the last 60 years, the ratio of people living in the country versus the city has flipped, with people in cities outnumbering those in the country for the first time in human history in 2007. Planet Earth used to be a rural place, but it's not anymore. People know their own mind, and when they vote with their feet with such consistency, we are tempted to conclude that city living makes them happier. But what if moving to the cities is just another case of our modern obsession with autonomy and all the opportunities that are available in cities compared to the country? Sure enough, there are losses in connection when people move to the city. For example, when pollsters ask people if they know someone they would trust with their house keys, despite having far fewer choices in their friendships, country folks are more likely to say yes. People in rural areas feel a tighter connection to their community, they're more satisfied with their friendships, and as a result, they're more likely to be very happy than people in urban areas. We may find what we want when we prioritize autonomy, but we lose what we need. So what can be done about it? How do we rediscover the balance of our ancestors in a world that emphasizes autonomy? There are many things we can do, but one of my favorite answers can be found in surveys on the religious practices of rich and poor people. When we dive into these data, we see that prayer leads to greater happiness among poor people than rich ones, which makes perfect sense given that rich people already have a lot of things that poor people pray for, like better health care and schools for their children. Far more interestingly, however, we also see that attending religious services leads to greater happiness among the rich than among the poor. Why is that? The answer brings us back to where we started. Poor people need each other, rich people don't. When poor people require a tool they don't own, buying it is out of the question, but borrowing it is not. When poor people need someone to watch their dog, hiring a dog sitter is out of the question, but asking a neighbor is not. For these and 1,000 other reasons, poor people depend on each other. People in poor neighborhoods live in a complex web of interdependence, with everyone counting on each other to help keep the boat afloat. As a result, poor people are about twice as likely as rich people to get together with their neighbors at least a few times a week. In contrast, rich people are about twice as likely to see their neighbors only a few times a year. And that is why rich people who attend services several times a week are about twice as likely to be very happy as rich people who never attend services. Attendance at religious services leads rich people to form and maintain social connections they are otherwise inclined to avoid. These findings show us the importance of increasing our connections even when we're only doing so because our circumstances force it upon us. If we want to regain and perhaps even exceed the happiness of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, we need to re-emphasize connection. Human beings did not evolve to live alone. We are a gregarious species who need others psychologically, even when we no longer need them physically.
Thank you, William. Okay, everyone, whether you're working on your connections or your autonomy, whether you're celebrating or ignoring Valentine's Day, I hope the rest of your day goes well. If you got something out of the show, please leave us a rating or review to help others find it. That does it for us this week. These episodes were written by me, Michael Kovnat, and edited by Caleb Bissinger. The Next Big Idea Daily is proud to be part of the LinkedIn Podcast Network. We'll see you Monday.